This is the webinar on content for niche sites, Amazon affiliate sites, and I guess authority sites, if you call them that. I'm going to go over two methods in this live session. And basically, I'm going to walk through a couple of examples. So I'll explain, how to use these two different methods, and then I'll walk through the examples live. And I didn't do these ahead of time. I pulled up a couple web pages just so that we have a reference point to start from, so it'll go smoothly. Give me a shout in the chat. Let me know if you can hear me, number one, and your name and where you're from and stuff. So let me know if it's the first time you're on one of these sessions, and we'll get started shortly here. So just need to make sure this presentation is going to display properly, and it looks good, All right. And I know there's always a little bit of a delay, so I'm just going to ramble on here for a second. I've done these, a similar topic before on these two methods, the FAQ and the RPM, but what I'm doing is the demos are different, right? So we'll look at different, topics to go through. So that should be interesting anyway. And if you have any specific questions, like there was a question about content that I got in a live stream just earlier, and it was about like putting a summary of let's say you have 1,000-word review or something, or maybe it's 2,000, who knows, but instead of putting like the summary at the end, to put it at the beginning. I think that's fine. There's no issue with that. A lot of times if you're writing a summary or sort of an intro, you can say, hey, here's the favorite one that we picked, instead of burying that at the bottom. So we have Duke on, which is great. Okay, it looks like it could be a light crowd. I've been experimenting and doing different things with how I'm telling people about these webinars. So it's pretty, it's interesting overall. We have John is on, and Tom, and then Renee from Copenhagen. Audio is good, but the video is not so good. How's the video for other people? Just curious with, is that Denmark? My geography is bad. Renee, since you're so far away, maybe that has something to do with it, but it's always a struggle. Some people tell me it's the platform, and then usually that's what people say, platform, or blame some sort of networking thing, which is common. But thanks for letting me know. It'd be great to resolve it if we could. Okay. Tom's in Baltimore. Cindy says the video's great. Audio's good. Video's okay. Video's fine from the Bay Area so far. Okay. So just curious, do the live streams on YouTube, are those higher quality from a video perspective? Just curious. Okay. And okay, I was going to say, I would geek out about the technology and how well it's working for the full hour, but it'll be more beneficial if I just get to the point here. But keep me posted if you do have any connectivity issues. As Maryan mentions, there should be a reconnect button or a refresh or something. Hit that. A lot of times that'll resolve it if there's some issue. And I do try to watch what's happening, what's going on in the chat. So if there's an issue, I don't keep talking for like 15 minutes when no one can hear me, because that would just be bad. So, all right, we're going to get started. I recommend that you don't have like other tabs open. Maybe you're like scrolling through Facebook, or you have a chat open or something like that. I recommend you close those if you're really trying to, I guess, immerse yourself in the process here. Get out a notebook, take some notes and stuff like that. Okay. You'll be able to watch a replay later as well. So if you got the link to come watch this, you should be able to, watch the replay later. And then I think at that point, you're able to like watch it on YouTube, have a little bit more capability. So, all right. People can hear me. We've identified that. That is a good thing. who am I? I'm Doug Cunnington. I think most people have at least been on one of these or at least seen a live stream before. I founded Niche Site Project about 4 years ago. Actually, it's really close to like the day, right? I don't remember the exact day. I wonder if I could track it down when I found Smart Passive Income, the podcast, and started listening to it obsessively, and then launched a failure of a site. I think it must have been April of 2013. So I started Niche Site Project as a blog. Now I'm branching out more into YouTube stuff right now, but I like them both. So this is me and our new dog, Georgie, in the bottom picture. And that was taken just a couple weeks ago when I was down in Denver. And then Brody, he passed away last year, but that's him and my dad and I down in Yellowstone National Park there. So that was like in the summers. I think there's a lot of snow down there still right now. And by the way, this picture with Georgie, again, up or down in Denver, I have like a pretty nice vlog that I'm going to publish probably this weekend of the trip. So that should be fun. It was fun for me anyway. It's like a home movie. All right. I've been featured and quoted in a few places just as a reference point. Why should you listen to me? Because I've done a few things, and I guess I have the social credibility out there, social proof. I've had some ups and downs since it's a small, intimate crowd here today. It looks like we only have like a dozen people or so. I'm not going to go too deep into this. I think a lot of people have heard a little piece of my story over some videos and stuff, but basically things go up and down. That's the point of this. A lot of times when you hear case studies or you see other people's blogs or videos or whatever, they're only telling you the high points. They conceal any sort of issues that they're having. They try and hide it, or they don't they don't reveal it. So there are definitely ups and downs, and there's a down. I can keep adding to the graph. So recently, I haven't done a video on this yet, but I'm not, hiding it or anything. So recently I had, I took over a site. I bought one of my partners out. I took over a site, and we had like an email list of over 10,000. I was doing some work. I was migrating things, and basically I sent an email out that got marked with spam or as spam. So many people complained about it that the email provider kicked me out, right? They kicked me out, and I lost everything, right? So I lost the full list. Now, sure, I had like some piece of backup, not everything, right? And then there's also risk if I like try and email those people again on another provider, I could have issues there. So again, the point is mistakes are made, right? Mistakes are made at the beginning, at the end, and throughout. I sort of acted too abruptly in sending out the specific email. All right, Q&A is at the end, so you can hold your questions till the end. That'll be helpful. You'll have the ability to mark it as a question versus regular chat, and that's just makes it a little bit more helpful, a little easier for me to find the questions. So why niche sites? For me, I think that niche sites allow you to basically learn a wide range of skills. So we're talking SEO ideas, right? So that's a big piece of it. Content, I guess we'll note that as books, themes, hosting, responsive design, and domain. So it tells you, or it teaches you sort of a suite of skills that you could apply in many different places. And some people like learn a little bit of each, and then they really love one portion of it. So I know some people that, they got into it, they were okay at most things, but they had a little bit of a development background, and then they started developing their own themes, right? So it's a software company. They sell themes, and you don't have to sell, a huge number of them, right? You just have to have a high quality product and make sure you provide good service. Alternatively, I have another friend, right, who got into SEO. So he did well at white hat outreach, and he wasn't great at first, but he got better and better over time, and would rather, work at an agency and learn the SEO side of it and outreach versus, writing more content or working with themes, for example. So you may find that you like a certain portion of it, and it's a great way. Niche sites are a great way to learn a suite of skills. A couple of examples. I'm not going to belabor these, but this is Dave Fox. I coached him back in 2015. He's doing great now. He's had some ups and downs over time as well. And I haven't interviewed him on the YouTube channel here recently, but I need to actually follow up with him. Yeah, like I said, he's had some ups and downs, but he's doing well, making a full-time living from Amazon. Rob Atkinson, I coached him as well. In both cases, I have interviews and discussions with both Rob and Dave on the YouTube channel. But Rob's doing fantastic. I know, I haven't been able to provide more updated earnings reports, but he's doing really well. So just out of respect, I'm not showing any more of his earnings, but he's doing really well and working on, bigger and more interesting projects as he moves forward, which is awesome. So just in a short amount of time, he's, making way more money than he could have in his corporate job ever. All right, and we're going to get into the meat of the presentation now. Again, if you have questions, since it is small, feel free to type them in. I don't think the chat's going to explode today or anything, so that's fine. You could ask. I may, if it's very relevant, I'll go ahead and answer it. Additionally, through these two methods, because these are like live demos that I'm going to work through just live, I'll need your input. So I'm going to ask questions and please answer. Otherwise, it'll be less fun for everyone. So yeah, just this is interactive. So when I ask questions, feel free to, please do answer them. So not feel free, but please do answer them. The first one we're going to talk about is the FAQ method. So it's pretty straightforward. FAQ is frequently asked questions. And this is literally how I wrote my first Amazon affiliate review post, the one that, really got me started. And I wasn't sure. I don't know where I got the idea specifically, other than I was like, I don't know really anything about this product. I've never owned one. I don't know the details. So I just started asking questions, right? That's really it. You write questions down and then you go find the answers to the questions. It's very simple. It's very straightforward, and it works really well. One of the added benefits is if you have a question about something that you don't know anything about, it's probably a common question that other people have, right? When they don't know anything about it, right? So kombucha is what we're going to talk about today. So how to make kombucha. And people may know I homebrew beer. I'm really into beer. The next example will be about beer, but I like fermenting things, right? So beer is, fermented malt and hops, and kombucha is another fermented, product. So I know people in my homebrew club who make kombucha, and eventually I was like, hey, I'm going to give it a shot, even though it looks really gross, right? This looks disgusting. You should see it in person. It's way slimier than you think it is. And by the way, does anyone drink kombucha? Let me know in the chat. Does anyone drink kombucha? Do you make kombucha at home? Have you ever, seen it at the store or heard of it? So my guess is probably not too much, because I'm in a weird, subset of people where I actually know of kombucha and know people that make it at home and stuff like that. And Rudy is already getting into the spirit of things. This is great. So we're going to jump right in to the FAQ method. So kombucha, and I'm just over here in a Google Doc We're going to keep it simple. I'm going to go ahead and I usually just do like, we'll just number them. And the idea here is, you don't have to come up with a million of them like right off the bat. You could probably start with like 10 questions. If you could just come up with like 10, well, we'll say like 10 to 15 questions, assuming that maybe some of the questions aren't that great, or some of the questions sort of are so related to another one that you could just include it in there. But let's get into it. So if you have questions about kombucha, then ask away. So Rudy, number 1. Anyone drink kombucha? Okay. So the first one is, what is kombucha? And I'll start answering some of the questions because this is such an unknown product, or people don't drink a lot of it. It's fermented tea, right? It's fermented sweet tea, and it ends up being like a little bit acidic, and it's like, I think it's a Chinese, from what I understand, it was, developed in China like thousands of years ago. And I think it's very popular in like Russia. I think it's popular in Russia as well. And okay, this is a great topic then. All right. So kombucha is fermented tea. Duke says, what's the alcohol percentage of kombucha? So what's the alcohol ABV of kombucha? And by the way, it's usually under 0.5%. How much time does it take to brew? How much time does it take to brew kombucha? Nice. Is it served hot or cold? I don't know why I capitalized those, but just doing it. Very nice. Renee says you've never heard or seen it before. All right. Is it healthy? Is kombucha healthy? Like I said, I'll just quickly answer a couple of these because it'll spawn even more questions. So what's the ABV? Like I said, it's usually under 0.5%. How much time does it take to brew kombucha? Anywhere between like 7 and 20 days. It depends on the temperature of where you're fermenting it. So any fermented metabolism process that is going on basically goes faster, right? When it's warmer, it goes slower when it's colder. Is it served hot or cold? Usually it's cold. Is it healthy? People say that it's healthy. It has like live cultures in it. Like the gross picture that I showed you, those are the live cultures. You don't drink that part. It actually just looks like, like tea. It looks like tea when you pour it. And a lot of times people will put fruit, and I'll just mention that to spawn. You'll put fruit, you could put spices, you could put whatever you want in there. And so you could end up, I have a couple with like, put like a triple berry, you get the triple berry in the frozen section at the grocery store. I just put in, half a cup or a cup of like fresh berries after the ferment. And then you end up with like a beautiful, like, I guess it's sort of like purpley pink, concoction. Okay. And I see some other fantastic questions coming through. What are the origins of kombucha? And do you add sugar or other additives? Do you add sugar or other additives? How many days can I store it? Does it expire? Cool. So we have 9. Let's come up with 6 more so we can get to the 15. These are great. I'm going to throw a couple in here too. Okay, and there's a good one from Rudy. What's the brewing process? What kind of tea can you use? By the way, black tea is traditionally like 100%, but the SCOBY that I have, and I'll talk about that in a second, the SCOBY that I have, that's the disc, sort of the weird looking disc that I showed you before, this thing, the SCOBY, I'll tell you what that stands for as well. The SCOBY, that I got it from a person who basically was using 50% black, 50% green tea. So I like it with that 50% ratio. And okay, so what kind of tea can you use? What's the setup cost? Setup cost for a kombucha, like brewing equipment, something like that. This is like a brainstorming process, right? So the grammar is a little goofed up and it's fine, right? What's the setup cost for kombucha brewing equipment? What does it taste like? It's like a little, and again, I'll just answer some of the questions because it'll spawn even more, and it's kind of interesting as well. It tastes just a tiny bit like, well, it depends on how strong the tea, but it may have a tea flavor, right? And that if you're using like half green, half black, you'll end up with some sort of a blend. It's just sort of tea like. It won't be, especially sweet, but there may be a tiny bit of sweetness, up to like significantly sweet if someone like back sweetens it. And the fermentation stuff that is going on, part of it's like acetobacter, and then there's I think some like lactic type, like lactic bacteria in there, so it's a little bit tart. And if you let it sit for too long, like normally the fermentation would be like 7 to 20 days or so depending on the temperature, if you let it go too long, it basically just turns into vinegar made out of tea, which isn't, I mean, you wouldn't want to drink that because it would be like so tart, but you could make like salad dressing with kombucha if it's like pretty vinegary, and then it'll taste like very interesting. So it should taste like a little bit of a tart tea. And John, good for you. Yes, it is carbonated. So typically, I mean, you can have it still, but typically it's lightly carbonated. Why bother? Nice, Rudy. Okay, so we have 15, and this is a good start, right? So this is basically all you have to do. And, you would come up with your questions, maybe, sort them out. Like, it doesn't matter at this point, but, what are the origins? Maybe that would go up to the top, right? Maybe that makes sense as the first thing that we have here, right? So what are the origins of kombucha? And you can resort it a little bit, but it's not super important. And then after that, I mean, you just go out there and start Googling it. So I just looked up kombucha over here, and what are the health benefits? Can you get drunk on kombucha? What are the side effects? Does it help you lose weight? There's a ton of questions that you could just like go through and start doing research, right? So very straightforward. Again, you come up with questions and then you answer them. Now, the interesting, side effect of this is you come up with the questions. If you just gave this to a writer, they should be able to go out there and research it. You could just tell them, hey, just go research on Google and come up with, 100 to 300 words for the answer for each one of the questions. Now, some of them, it may not be as deep, right? What's the ABV of kombucha? That would definitely be on the shorter end, but you, like a writer, still should be able to say, well, it's normally in this range. Here are some of the impacts. Here are some of the factors that can impact the alcohol percentage, right? So even if it's an answer that they could just give and say it's usually under 0.25 or 0.5%, basically, you should be able to elaborate. A writer should be able to elaborate on that so that it's a much longer answer. So very straightforward, and this is perfect for niches or products that you don't know anything about. It helps you guide the writer. So if you're hiring a writer, it makes it very straightforward about like what you're looking for. And again, you can keep it simple and just say, write 200 words for each one of the answers, research it wherever you want. Be sure to, let me know let me know the websites that you research so that you could provide a reference at the end if you want. So it's that sort of simplicity that makes it easy to hire a writer. And then you don't even have to know anything about the product or, anything really. You just ask questions. And then if you're stuck, like trying to figure out questions, you can just go research. And I just put in the word kombucha. And then there are a bunch of suggested questions already. Super easy. Any thoughts or questions on the FAQ method? Okay. So as we're going back, and I'll just pause for a second here and mention on a personal note, in January, my wife and I didn't drink any beer. So we drank a lot of like just fizzy water and a lot of tea actually. And around the end of January, I was like getting in touch with my friend in the homebrew club. She makes a lot of kombucha. So I got the SCOBY from her, right? So whenever you make a batch of kombucha, you have to use a SCOBY, right? That's what ferments it. And it stands for, it's a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. SCOBY. So fun name. And whenever you make a batch, there's another SCOBY produced, right? So you put a SCOBY into your chilled like sweet tea, and then it ferments, and there's a new SCOBY on top. And every time you make a batch, there's another SCOBY. And they'll sort of layer on top of each other, but if you make kombucha, you have extra SCOBYs so you could share with people. And by the way, the thing is, with beer, it's the same way. So if you brew a batch of beer, the waste product is like additional yeast. So if you make a batch of beer, you end up with like, anywhere from like 3 to 5 or 6 times the amount of yeast you need for your next batch. So, if you make a batch of beer, you just have a ton of extra yeast. So similar fermentation situation. Anyway, I got into it because I wasn't drinking any alcohol. And I was like, oh, I like fermenting stuff. This looks like a pretty straightforward, easy way. It's way easier than making beer, by the way. And Tom asked a question. You may have missed it. Did I say, what is the KGR keyword for this post example? There is no K. This has nothing to do with the keyword golden ratio, Tom. So this is just an example about how to write content. So there's no like keyword that I'm targeting or anything like that. Good question. Yeah, this has nothing to do with the keyword golden ratio. Sakit says, can I write one complete post with the FAQ method? Yes. Okay, let's move on to the research paper method, RPM. So this will help you write an outline. And this is a little bit deeper, right? This is a little bit deeper. It's going to take a little bit longer. And I used this method when I was working on the Project Go White Hat site. The content on the Project Go White Hat site was poor. It wasn't written well. The information wasn't that great. And when I looked at the competition, I thought it was way better. So I knew we needed to improve the content on the site. This is the method that I used, research paper method. So again, quite simple. You research the topic and then you create an outline. So similar, output, you're going to end up with like an outline or a list of items that you can give to a writer or write the content yourself, but you will have to spend time researching. The research process can be a little bit more sloppy, right? Because people approach it differently. So to keep it simple, we're just going to like Google some stuff and see where it leads. Now, if again, everyone researches a little bit different, but you could take a slightly different approach. You could, for example, like go to a bookstore or go to the library and then, go take some notes and then come back, do a little research online, and then come up with your outline. It doesn't really matter, but most people, considering we're talking about creating a website, most people are online wanting to do research online. So today, for our topic, we'll do how to judge a beer. All right. So again, I didn't do extra research ahead of time. All I did was Google judging a beer. All right. And the way I like to approach it, number one, this will be an outline format. So I'm just going to go ahead and outline. I'm going to put it in an outline format. You could use whatever document you want. If you're just using text or something, which is fine, you can just, use a normal outline format, and we'll just go with this, simple, straightforward outlining format. So judging a beer. Again, this is how I would do it. So I'm going to go through and I see how to judge a beer by the BJCP, which I'm intimately familiar with this PDF. I'm going to go ahead and open it up. How to judge or how to review a beer from a Beer Advocate, which is like a forum where they, have, I guess it's like community sourced beer reviews. So from what I know, right, I know the BJCP is like the actual, like that is the nonprofit organization that comes up with the data. And then Beer Advocate is a community. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then we have winning-homebrew.com. Okay, we'll take a look at that too. And let's see if there's anything else. Allaboutbeer.com. That's a magazine, and the secrets of judging beer. So we're just going to take a look at a few of these. So number one, we see the PDF by Peter Garofalo and how to judge a beer. Again, this is from the BJCP. It's a nonprofit. I'm actually a national level judge there, and they go step by step on exactly how to judge it. I'm not going to read everything, but I'm just going to kind of hit the highlights for a couple of these. So they talk about fill in the score sheet. So we hear they're using a score sheet. All right. Got to remember that. Examine the bottle. Look for, just signs of anything on the bottle. Open the beer and pour out 1 to 3 ounces. Raising a solid head. That's the foam on top. Okay. And then you write down the initial aromas next. And then you go on to the appearance after that. And then now you taste the beer. So it's step 6 before you even taste it. And then you get an initial impression. And then you try and detect flavor components in various areas. So malt, hops, fermentation character, balance, etc. And then after that, you talk about the mouthfeel and then the overall impression. So it's pretty extremely detailed, and they take you through a very methodical way, which makes sense considering it's like the official organization. So we'll file that in the back of our minds for a minute. Again, we're just researching, right? We're not writing anything yet. We need more information before we can write anything because we don't understand what's going on yet. So this is Beer Advocate. This is the crowdsourced community where people upload information, right? They upload reviews. So how to review a beer. This person, Todd, it was the founder. And they're writing about how to review beers in 2005. They talk about the goal of the site and how to review it. So many see this is an unnecessary process left to geeks and so on. And as I'm looking through, they go through appearance. All right, good. They go through smell, which is the aroma, and they go through taste and then mouthfeel. Now I have some other pro tips, and there's one thing that I noticed that I want to point out. And I saw it in the snippet on the Google results. So there are other considerations. Hopefully I'll see it in a second. So keep the style in mind. So they talk about beer advocates, beer styles, right? Um, they say check out the beer judge certification program in the Brewers Association. That's the pro version of the like Home Brewers Association. So we're getting deeper in the weeds, but this is important. I saw this in the snippet over here. So in the section for beer advocate, I saw they mention the BJCP. The reason why I'm pointing this out is the first result was this PDF, which is super thorough and it's like reading a technical document. And then this is a website with ads and stuff, and it's crowdsourced, right? There's one thing that I've learned on the internet. It's like the mass of people usually, they're not that great, right? I'll just leave it at that. People may be talking about stuff that they don't know anything about. And I find that is probably the case with a lot of the beer like reviews that are out there where anyone can just put whatever they want. It's like a Facebook group. All right. So the reason why I'm pointing this out is because they tell you here to check out the beer judge certification program for further information. That means that we know that beer advocate, right? There's some good information here, especially like how they organize it in a simpler way. It's far more readable. But when we look at this PDF from BJCP versus beer advocate, we see that BJCP is a higher tier resource. So we'll keep that in mind. Again, the beer advocate version is way more readable and they sort of break it down in a way that's a little simpler. Okay. Now remember, we're going to write down sort of like an outline on how to judge a beer. That's the goal here. Next, we have winninghomebrew.com. And this looks like a kind of an old style website a little bit. And as we're scrolling down, there's just a lot of text, and it looks like they're referring to the BJCP a lot. So this is probably based on just the BJCP sheet that we saw before, but again, it's formatted a little bit more for the web, which is good to note. So we have aroma, which is smell, sight, which is the appearance, taste, which is the flavor. They talk about the different kinds of flavor, and then the mouthfeel, and then pleasure. So it actually just follows the exact score sheet stuff. So there's some other things that they note here. Okay, that's good to note. And I'm going to scroll or look at the next tab. So all about beer is another. They have some sort of pop-up that's blocking it. So they lost me here. I'm out. I'm not going to pay attention to them now. Okay. So I've compressed like the research into a few minutes, but you should probably spend a couple hours like reading this stuff and like really understanding what's going on. You should be able to write an outline based on the research that you've done. And then you can go back, of course, and look at the resources that you found. But what you want to do is write an outline. So we know that, how to judge a beer. We saw that everyone seemed to go through the same format in that they were looking at like a BJCP score sheet style. So you are looking at like a few different areas. Even before you drink the beer, you're looking at a few areas. So you'll visually inspect, right? So I'm just going to do this from memory, right? So I should know it pretty well. So we'll say visually inspect the bottle or vessel. And then we'll say, pour out or pour into a glass. And we're just going to list out the steps here with the idea that we can go back again. We can go back and fix up the outlines so that we can, write a very thorough like how to, or if it's informational, right? Or not informational, but if it's a product review, not a how to, then you could still use the same like process, but instead of looking at like how to information, you would look up information about a product. So if we were trying to write a review about a beer brewing system, then you would potentially read all the specs that you could get your hands on. You would go to the manufacturer's website and so on. So here, when we're talking about beer, you pour it into a glass and then you check out the aroma. Check out the aroma, and then you check out the appearance. Then check out the flavor. And you'll notice, right? I'm not going into any detail. I'm just hitting the high level stuff because it's easier to deal with, right? We can go back and add details later. You should be writing this way all the time. And then like overall, how they like the beer. So this is like the process. These roughly fit into the score sheet. And then, we can also like generalize it, right? So we can say, well, we need to have an intro, like some sort of like, why are we doing this? And we could say like, why judge a beer? The goal isn't to get this perfect the first time around. It's just to get something down on paper, right? So why judge a beer? Something like that. Maybe you think of other stuff later, right? So visually inspect the can or bottle or whatever. So you could say, look for sediment in the bottle, right? Sediment in the bottle. Say at bottom, and we'll say, look for, anything floating in the bottle, which you don't want to find anything floating in the bottle. Like nothing should be in there. And then you pour it into a glass so you can talk about the process, how much, what kind of glass. I'm phrasing it as a question, but you would state it. You don't have to put these as a question as the FAQ, right? You just say, pour into a glass. You should pour 1 to 3 ounces. You should try to, rouse foam, get a head. And then we can keep going. And I'm going to go ahead and just like keep it brief for the rest of them. So, malt, hops, appearance. So you have the color, you have the head, you have head retention, stuff like that. You have the flavor. So, we can go deep on this, but malt, hops, bitterness, etc. And you can note all sorts of like the finish, dryness, sweetness, whatever. There's a lot of nuance. Mouth feel, so that could be very carbonated. That's a type of mouth feel, so it's sort of tingly. Very carbonated. And I'm just going to go kind of brief so I don't bore everyone out of their mind. So mouthfeel, it could be, full or, light bodied. And overall, really enjoyable or something like that. Or it could be, tastes bad, not enjoyable. So what you would do, right? So we have a start here, and this specific outline is not something that I could probably give to a writer and have them do a great job on the first draft, this would still need work. But again, I literally looked up a few resources, I skimmed them, I had a decent idea about like the process because, you know, there were multiple like references that we were able to look at that took us through the same process in visually like different formats. So again, we have the PDF, which is a little hard to read, but very thorough. And then we have this, you know, easier to read, but maybe not as deep and not as detailed. And by looking at both of them plus the other one, right, we sort of had the idea reinforced on the order that things should be done, the details that should be like looked at in each one of the steps. And, you know, sometimes as you write these, you'll figure things out. Like as you're doing more research and as you're looking at the process and how it's outlined, you'll figure out that, oh, you know what, they actually mean something a little bit different in the flavor section when they're talking about the finish, right? You know, they mean X when I thought they meant Y. So as you're going through this, you may have different, like a better understanding. Additionally, like once you clean this up, so I would recommend, you know, you do 1 to 2 hours of research, you have a good understanding, spend half an hour, you know, just brain dump, sort of organize things the best you can, take a break from it, walk away, don't think about it, don't try and like solve the problem right away, come back to it maybe the next day or a few days later. And then you'll have like a fresher view. Maybe you can review some of the material that you already, you know, read, right? The source material, or you could just go and see if you want to edit things, right? Edit things in your outline. Then when you get it over to a writer, or if you write it yourself, you could provide the sources that you looked at. And, you know, you could use other resources. You could encourage people to check things out. Additionally, right, there's so much stuff on YouTube that you could probably find a couple YouTube videos as well and have the writer watch it if they want. You know, some people like videos, some people don't like videos. So if it can be helpful, that is another resource where, you know, you could watch the videos at double speed and really speed through them. So this is the RPM method, and it's literally what I went through for, you know, Project Go White Hat. I've done this on a few other posts as well, and it's pretty straightforward, especially with, I mean, a how-to post like this is a little bit more difficult than a product post. So with a product post, you can go to the manufacturer's website, usually download the manual for the product for free, and it's organized really well already. Like the manufacturer knows the product better than almost anyone, hopefully, and you're able to, you know, write a really good outline very quickly. All right, so that is how you do the RPM method. And quickly, before we get to the questions, I see a couple questions that popped up. I'm going to mention Five Figure Niche Site. So enrollment is currently closed, but it will open up in a few weeks. So it'll be mid-April. And here's like the little product shot there. So that's Dave Fox and Rob over here on the box. So there's a lot of material in the course. It basically takes you from, you know, start to finish, right? So before you like have an idea for a niche, you go through brainstorming, we go through keyword research, launching the site, you know, publishing content, hiring writers, getting you know, traffic on your site, networking in a way that works, that, you know, it doesn't feel like you're spamming the internet. You're really building relationships, onto building an email list, selling the site, and so on. So it starts very basic and goes to very advanced, where, you know, the material in there is not something you'll probably, if you're just starting, you probably won't be able to use like the last couple units for a little while, right? It'll take you a little while to build up a site to that level. And I'll mention the course was created with proven principles and techniques, and I've done these, and now students are doing these. I've actually just in the last couple weeks, actually couple days, students that enrolled the middle of last year or early last year, they're making about $100 a month. So they just let me know. So pretty cool. All right, let's get to the questions before we run out of time here. And I'm just going to turn off the screen sharing so I come back on. All right. So Rudy says, would you format the post in the form of question and answer or just answers in a flowing format? That is a personal decision for you. I like to have the questions listed, right? So I'd like to have the questions as like an H3 subheading or H2. It doesn't really matter. Either one is fine. Because those subheadings are usually, the questions themselves are usually good long tail keywords. So it's good to have those in. You can rank for those common questions. All right. Any other questions, or did I just cover it really well today? Sakit says the RPM was well explained. This time you understood. Great. Great. And, one thing to emphasize is you do have to spend some time. I mean, if you're sitting down for an hour reading about something, that's a pretty significant amount of time. And I'm talking about, no other distractions. You're sitting down, you're reading that material. You may be taking notes on it. You're keeping you're paying attention. You're keeping track of what you're learning. And then you write the outline, you write a good outline on it. All right. If there's okay, couple questions. Rudy says, once you create an outline, can you just continue to add to it as you expand your content? Yes, you can. In time, you might have enough info for an ebook. True. That's another story for another day. I think not always, but most of the time when I hear people, and I've been talking about you, Rudy, specifically, but a lot of times when people tell me that they have an ebook and they're using it as a lead magnet or something like that, it doesn't really, it's usually a waste of time for a number of reasons, but you're right. You could have enough for an ebook. John says, all the prep work is easy and the hard part is actually writing. It twists you into knots. Okay. So a couple of things you could do with that. I mean, going back to our example here, I'm going to share my screen again. So in that case, John, I would say the FAQ method is usually more straightforward. And the thing is, kind of like what Rudy is mentioning, you just keep adding to it. So, what is kombucha? It's fermented. That's the simplest answer. Then you can expand on it, right? So what ferments it, and you could just make it longer. Once you start writing this outline, it's much easier. The other easy part, right? So what is kombucha? You don't have to reinvent the wheel here. So we'll click on the Wikipedia. Kombucha is a variety of lightly effervescent sweetened black or green tea, commonly as functional beverages for their supposed health benefits. So basically you can get some ideas about what other people are writing. So and as we read this, they talk about the SCOBY that I mentioned. They talk about the microbial populations, and then the yeast and the Saccharomyces and the other glutaconic acetobacter and so on, right? So you can start adding more and more detail. And the hardest part is when you do start with nothing on your page. But once you have a question, you're like, well, I'll just answer these questions first, and then we'll go from there. And then we'll add more later. Again, the ABV one is an easy one. So it's usually less than 0.5. And then you could expand on it and talk about why. So hopefully that helps a little bit. And once, the more you write, the easier it will get. I talked to actually an interview that I did earlier this week is going to go live next week with Jaron, and he was, talking about he's done like all his writing on the site. He's new to niche sites. He got started in like the November timeframe, and he's making about $100 a month thanks to the keyword golden ratio primarily, right? So he had some other content, but the keyword golden ratio is the stuff that's really working out. He did all the writing himself, and he mentioned that his background was like his major was basically something where he had to write a decent amount. So he was used to having to write. And I didn't write that much. I did a lot of technical writing, but that could be a little bit drier. Anyway, the point is he was used to, sitting down and writing. So I think it came to him a little bit easier, but he had some suggestions. So check out his video when it comes out next week. Sakit says, so I said something about I prefer to list the questions as it'll help for long tail keywords. Yeah. So you're asking, should I list down topics like a table of contents or just start with the frequently asked questions? What's better? Well, neither one's better. I personally don't use a table of contents, but it's fine to do that. So it's totally up to you. I would suggest having like an intro, buyer's guide. It depends on the type of content. But you wouldn't normally want to just like have a list of questions and answer them. There needs to be other context around it. So unless it's just a frequently asked questions page, that would be fine. Renee has a great question. Do I ever call or email the product manufacturers for information or questions or interviews? No, but I think that would be fine. A lot of times, I mean, if you're just getting information, like you could just look it up, right? You could look it up, and I mean, I suppose it could happen, but unless you actually have the product and like you could ask a really like well-informed question, there's probably not a reason for you to call and ask them a question. However, a lot of times, I'm looking for a device or whatever, but like if you have a product or whatever, there's a phone number and you probably can call them up and ask them a question and say, hey, I called up manufacturer, I asked them about blah, and they told me this. So I think that would be fine. I think that's a great way to approach it. You probably don't have to call if you don't want to, but it could be a nice way to get like more interesting information. Any other questions out there? And, again, on content, if, John mentioned having a harder time writing. I mean, if it is easier for you to like write the outline, write out the questions, have a writer, like I said, write out 100 words per answer per question. Then you edit it after that. If that makes it easier, try that. Like maybe you're able to get the writer to write 100 words per question, and then you could go in there and add another 100. So, you essentially double the amount of content you have, which is a good thing overall. Any other questions on these two methods or content or anything like that? Nenad is just joining. The topic is content, and we're actually just finishing, so you may want to watch the replay because we already went through the demo. And unfortunately, because of the way these are formatted, I won't go through again, but if you rewind it, you should be able to watch the replay of the two demos. Okay, Rudy says, should you avoid commonly asked questions because they are always used in frequently asked question websites like what, where, why, and who? The answer is no. But Rudy, why would you want to avoid the common questions? That seems counterintuitive to me if they're literally common questions. So I feel like maybe I'm missing something. So why would you want to omit those? And Rudy says to create a unique sales position. You know what? I don't know. I think, all right, I'm going to be straight with you, Rudy. I think what you should do is you should master or get really damn good at a regular sales position, and then you could start branching out and trying to make it unique. But if in this example, you're probably not an expert in the topic. So to be able to come up with a unique sales position from a, like not being super well informed, it's going to be really difficult. So my suggestion would be do the common stuff, right? It's literally the frequently asked questions method. So if you wanted to flip it upside down and have the unusual ask questions method, that could be something that you add to it. But if they're unusual questions that people don't frequently ask, you're probably not going to get much traffic. It's not going to be as useful just in general. And if you're trying to have content that's useful that you're going to be able to get search traffic for, which I recommend, you should go for frequently asked questions, not unusually asked questions. Again, it's an interesting way to look at it, Rudy, but I'm not sure that's the best route. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. You say, thanks, good advice. All right, cool. And again, I think it's great to have unusual questions, but you should have them in addition to the frequently asked questions that people are actually searching for. I mean, one of the things in picking a niche, if you're getting into affiliate marketing, you don't want to go to a niche where there's zero competition, right? That means there's some problem with that particular niche. It's not profitable for some reason. If something's profitable, then there's going to be a market out there already. There's going to be some competition. That's a good thing. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, I want to go into a market where there's no competition, right? The unfortunate part is if you're doing that, that means you're going to have to educate the audience on whatever it is you're trying to start. That's usually much harder, right? And I can't remember any specific examples off the top of my head, but a lot of times, like if you're first to market on something, like you have to do a lot of educating, and you may not like crack the nut and go big. Sometimes it works out, but other times it's the second or third or fourth like sort of company or I guess initiative that hits. In the example, right, that may not be super relevant because it's like an outlier, but there were many other social networks that were similar to Facebook. There was like MySpace and Friendster that I recall. There were dozens of others, right? But Facebook like got it right, right? They did a little bit better. They fixed some of the other stuff that people didn't like, and the timing was right. But it wasn't the first, social network out there at all. Okay, so Rudy says, for example, my niche is cryptocurrency. Answering the question, what is cryptocurrency, has been used so much is very redundant. Okay. And I can respect your, I guess, the niche and, your comment that it's redundant. So, like, for example, for kombucha, same deal, right? If you just look up kombucha, it's like, what is kombucha? How do you make it? Like, that answer has been given like so many times. But if you have a site that's covering like kombucha, you need to have those answers in there, even if it's basic. So if someone lands on your site, you don't want them to have to leave your site because it's too advanced, right? Unless that happens to be your unique marketing position or whatever. But in general, there's going to be questions where it's like, yeah, everyone has that answer. It's very basic, but you kind of have to have it on there. So for the beer brewing stuff, it's like, what's the process to brew beer? That's like the most common question. Like how long does it take? But you have to have it on there if you're selling beer brewing products. Agnes says, is it okay to use a question as a content title? Yes, it is. Yeah, Rudy. So it sounds like you got my point. And yeah, I think you have to balance it with, practicality and what a visitor would expect to see on your site and what you want to publish. You don't have to put it on there. I mean, niche site project. I mean, I gave you that example, but niche site project, it assumes some baseline, like the blog portion, it assumes some baseline knowledge in general. So if you hop into certain areas, like you'll be lost. And I don't honestly do a great job walking a beginner from like, hey, what is affiliate marketing to exactly what I'm talking about. Same thing on the YouTube channel as well. I mean, I cover advanced stuff for people that already know a lot of the lingo. They've been around a little bit and they're trying to implement, right? So they're trying to implement, they're trying to do interesting stuff. They're not just asking like, what's a niche site? So I give the advice, but I don't necessarily follow it. I want to add that content, by the way. I want to add the more basic stuff because those are the early people that if you can get them in at the top of the funnel when they're just learning about a topic, that's great. All right. Any other questions out there? All right. Good session today. And I think we'll probably, what do we have going for next week? Let me double check here. I'm not sure the presentation that's coming up next week. Same time, same place. So I'm going to go ahead and I think a lot of people are like auto subscribed or something like that. So I can just add people in the future. I think the one coming up for next week is 17 tactics to improve income and boost conversions for affiliate sites. Okay, so thanks everyone. Rudy and Agnes, Duke as well, and anyone else that's on. So thanks for hopping in. And we have Sakit, Renee. All right, I'm out of here. And quick note, I did a couple things coming up. I'll mention. I almost forgot. I should have said this at the beginning. So I published a video on YouTube yesterday, and it was more like on marketing and positioning, not niche sites. But if you want to do me a favor, it'd be awesome if you watched the video and then left a comment. So it was about smart passive income and Pat Flynn. He has a new like segment on his YouTube channel, and it's basically the Jerry Seinfeld show, comedians in cars getting coffee. So again, if you have a minute, I think it's under 4 minutes long. You could watch the whole video, leave a comment. That'd be great. And hopefully, the idea is I want to like funnel some people that are watching those, like the series, over to my channel, right? It's a perfect audience. And I actually enjoy the segments that he did, but I talk about, again, the marketing and positioning. The other thing, I'm going to publish a couple keyword research videos in the next day or two. I may put them out today. It's on SEMrush and Longtail Pro. So either one of those are fine tools. And I just do like a very basic demo on using them. I'm not sure what people actually want to see with the tools, right? So, I don't do a huge amount of keyword research, and a lot of it is like internalized. I just do it really fast and don't pay attention. But if people have specific questions, it'd be great to ask them in those videos. And like I said, I may just publish both of those today because they're pretty good. Get them out the door. So, all right, cool. Thanks everyone. I appreciate the support, Sakit. And I know a couple people mentioned they watched into Agnes as well. So really appreciate that. Have a great day. We'll see you next time. Tomorrow I got the Q&A on the YouTube side. Thanks.